The Hawk That Dare Not Hunt by Day by Scott Odell, Chapter 25. We reached London Bridge before the tide turned, and in the dark moored off the customs dock. There was some discussion on deck, which we faintly heard, about taking us ashore, but it was finally decided, because of the recent fire, to leave us where we lay until morning. Our hands were untied, and we were each given a bowl of cold gruel to eat. Then, our hands tied again, we were left for the night, with a guard posted beside the cabin door. At dawn, my feet were unbound, and I was rowed ashore and marched into customs. What was left of it? One large room smelling of smoke, cold and bare, except for a bench and a barred window that looked out upon the river. From the window, I could see our ship riding trimly at anchor and two guards lounging against the roundhouse, from time to time arousing themselves long enough to spit upon the deck. I waited until noon when I was given another bowl of thin soup, this time with small pieces of eel floating about. I sat there for hours until the room darkened and long streamers of failing light fell across the Thames. Then a door opened and a light shone in my eyes. It was Herbert Belsey, carrying a lantern but no weapons, not even his whip. However, as I looked him full in the face, so upturned was his nose that I felt now, as I always felt, that his nostrils were the two black barrels of a pistol pointed squarely at my head. He smiled a twisted but plausible smile that, considering everything, surprised me. He put the lantern on the floor, which was covered with a musty, moth-old straw, and sat down on the bench facing me. I will not take up time apologizing for the treatment you have recently undergone, he said. Am undergoing, I corrected him. At the moment, yesterday and today. Because I lack the time or inclination for courtesies, he said. Let us proceed. I've talked to you before, in Cologne, if you remember, about the ownership of the Black Pearl. I explained then, and I repeat once more, that you are the ship's sole and rightful owner. You were unconvinced then about the matter of ownership. Are you still unconvinced? Yes, sir. I doubt that my uncle would lie to me. I see no reason for him doing so. Belsey reached deep into an inner pocket and drew forth a legal-looking document bound with a ribbon, which he untied and thrust the whole before me. Can you read? He asked. If not, I'll read it to you. Angered somewhat that he considered me an ignorant bumpkin, I took the document without a word, walked over to the barred window where the light was better, and read it aloud in a firm voice, though I did stumble over several words I had never seen before. You read all right, Belsey conceded. Now tell me, do you understand what you've read? Does it make sense to you? He thrust his head toward me in a long stare. In the lantern light, the scar on his face did not seem so disfiguring as I remembered it when I had first seen it in Cologne, months before. Do you understand what you've read? He asked again. A manifest, a ship's manifest, I answered. A list of goods, some 20 in all, listed in detail by your uncle, Jack Barton, put down item by item, and at the end, signed with his signature. Have you seen this manifest before? I don't remember it. Do you recognize the writing and the signature? Do they belong to your uncle? It looks like his writing. It is. I ask you, his handwriting? Surely you recognize your own uncle's signature. I kept my silence, whereupon Belsey reached into his capacious oak cloak and pulled forth a second document. It was more legal in appearance than the first, on finer paper, and tied with a ribbon. He spread it out on the bench where the full glow of the lantern fell upon it. Now read carefully, Belsey said. Pay close attention to the handwriting and to the signature." I did as I was directed, and when I had finished, Belsi placed the first document, the list of imported items, down beside it. "Now note," he said, holding the lantern above the two papers, "and you'll see that the first item filed with us at customs is a list of goods imported from Hamburg, upon which duty was paid." I recognized the paper instantly, remembering well the goods declared. An excellent ship's mast, for one thing, and the date. And Uncle Jack's crabbed chicken track signature. I also recalled the goods that we had not declared. A bale of fine goat's hair, for instance. "Do you recognize this manifest?" Belsi asked. "I've seen it before," I answered. "Now compare this list with the writing in the document beside it, which purports to be your father's last will and testament, in which he bequeaths his ship, the Trident, to your uncle Jack Barton." I read the document slowly, aware before I had finished that the first sentence was a forgery, a poor imitation of my father's handwriting. "Did the same man write both documents?" Belsi asked in the tones of a magistrate badgering a witness. "I don't know. Certainly you're familiar with your uncle's writing." "Not very familiar." "He's written you a letter, a note?" "Yes, 2 or 3. "You don't remember the handwriting?" "Not well." "Do the 2 documents look as if they were written by the same hand? Do the T's look the same? The S's? The signature?" "I haven't a good eye for these matters," I said. I walked over to the barred window and looked out, thinking fast. I didn't want to get mixed up with Belsi in the ownership of the boat, but I was in trouble. There was no question that Uncle Jack had destroyed my father's will, if he had ever written one, and substituted a will of his own. The ship by law belonged to me. That was clear. Belsi knew it, and I knew it. Through the window, I could see the Black Pearl riding calmly on the tide, but showing no lights except for a dim glow in the master's cabin, where I assumed Uncle Jack was still bound and guarded. "There's no riding light on the ship," I said to Belsi. "The river's full of traffic. Without a riding light, she could be hit or sunk. Something should be done about her at once. She's a hazard, lying there in the night, a dark, dangerous hull." "Come," Belsi said, seizing me by the arm. "We'll hang a light on her." The 2 of us rowed out the short distance to the ship and lighted her riding lantern. As I went by the master's cabin, I peered in, and seeing no one, asked Belsi what had become of my uncle. "He's in safe hands. He'll not bother you." "I don't think that he'd bother me." "Begging your pardon, uncle or not, he's a forger and a cutthroat," Belsi said, "and the sooner you realize the same, the better for you." "Where is he?" I asked again. "In Clink." Clink was the most notorious of London's many prisons, just across the river from customs, filthy, rat-infested, and difficult to grease your way out unless you had a small fortune to pass around. I was still not satisfied that Belsi had removed Uncle Jack from the ship, and I took a look around, giving the excuse that I wanted to see that everything was shipshape. Belsi followed me with a proprietary air, as if he were a part owner already. Over the deck, into the galley, he looked the hold and the bilge. If Uncle Jack was still aboard, the 2 of us could overpower Belsi, haul anchor, and in 5 minutes, the tide apace with us, be halfway down the river, on our way and out of the country. But he was apparently nowhere within hailing distance. Belsi took me back to the room that smelled of smoke and told me to make a bed for myself in the straw. He went to the door, opened it, closed it again, and was, as a sort of afterthought, came back and put the lantern down and hoisted his foot up on the bench. "I could send you over to Clink," he said, "along with your dear uncle, but I have a suggestion." Perhaps an idea that will appeal to you more than residence in prison. I alluded to it once before in Cologne, when I learned that the ship belonged to you and not to your uncle. Do you recall that occasion? Something of what was said, not much. This is it. You own the Black Pearl. Your rights to it will not be contested in court. Herbert Belsey, Esquire, will see to that, nor will it be questioned by your uncle. He will reside in Clink for a year or two at least, perhaps longer should we find it necessary. Your rights will not be contested because of me. Your uncle will reside in prison until I see fit to free him. For this service, and I presume we can give it this term, for this service I demand a half interest in the Black Pearl, a partnership, share and share alike. You to handle the ship. Go where you will, buy what you wish, bring your goods into London at will. No fees, no duties. In 5 years' time, if all goes well, if the book of rates is not changed, if the searchers are taken care of decently, we'll both be gentlemen of property. He picked up his lantern and went to the door. As he stood there, I walked toward him, considering my chances, of catching him unawares, of overpowering him, of making my way under cover and of darkness to the ship. The anchor was heavy, but I could handle it. Once free, the ship would catch the tide. It was the first time in my life I had considered an action without thinking of Uncle Jack, without calling upon him in spirit, without depending upon his advice or his presence. It gave me sudden strength to realize that I was now on my own man, no longer dependent upon anyone in the world except for myself. Voices beyond the door brought me to a halt. I was within a step of Belsey. I could have reached out and taken him by the throat. Wisely, I backed away and bowed stiffly, as he said, "There's no hurry, Master Barton. Take time to consider. If you should decide not to entertain my offer, we can declare the ship King's property by default, and you will thereby be relieved of all responsibilities." He closed the door and barred it. I crossed the room and for a long time stood at the window. The tide was at ebb, and the roar through the arches of London Bridge had not begun. In the quiet, cries and moans, and then shouts came across the water from Clink. I wondered if Uncle Jack had lent his own voice to this uproar. Then it was quiet again. The tide turned, and the water rushed under the bridge on its way to the sea, drowning out all sounds of pain and anger. The Black Pearl strained at her anchor as if anxious to slip her moorage, to flee down the river to the open sea. I stood at the barred window and looked out upon the dark river stitched with the lights of passing barges. There was a glow on the far bank, and against it I saw, or thought I saw, a figure standing, a man with an arm upraised, not beckoning, just a lone figure standing there in the night, who disappeared as I saw him. But in that moment, it was clear to me what my answer to Belsey would be, as clear as if it were written in letters of fire on the flowing stream. End of chapter 25.